Welcome back everybody, Danny here for another sim racing video. And on this video I want to talk about 10 big mistakes new sim racers make when they first start out in sim racing. Before we get started with this list, I want to make a disclaimer and say that none of these are any more or less important than the others, and they are not in any specific order. Making these mistakes can all be very detrimental to your performance and your overall enjoyment of sim racing if you continue to do them. And also, what you really need to consider is a lot of these also will adversely affect the other people who may be sim racing with you. So that's something you definitely need to keep in mind. Making these mistakes will not only affect you, but they affect other real people who are out there racing with you. So without further ado, we're going to get right into the mistakes. The first mistake is being too aggressive on the first few laps. I see this happen far too often in many sims, and that is a problem. You are far less likely to complete a race if you're being too aggressive on the first few laps. It's just common sense. It is just the way it is. It's been mathematically proven time and time again. You know, it's difficult to run a hard race with one other car. You know, it's not even easy to do that. It's very difficult to concentrate on braking points and not run the other car off the road. So you can only imagine how difficult it is if you're trying to run a very aggressive race with an entire pack of cars, which is how everybody is grouped together at the beginning of a race. What you want to do is take a step back, relax, let everybody get a little spread out, and then once there's some breathing room, then you can start being aggressive and trying to make your move. But never do that on the first few laps. You typically won't even finish the race if you do that, so it's just never a good idea. The second big mistake I see new sim racers doing is entering a public or online race without learning the track first. This is a huge no-no. If you hop into an online lobby with other real people and you have no experience with that track, or even a little bit of experience but not enough to know where the braking zones are and not know the general route or layout of the track, you're going to cause problems for other people. And not to mention, you'll never finish the race. You will either wreck out or something will happen for sure. You definitely do not want to do this. What you want to do is find out ahead of time where you're going to be racing and get some practice in on that track. Once you know the track, then join the public lobby or server. But please do not join the server without enough knowledge of the track and enough laps on that particular track. That's a huge no-no as well. And the third mistake, making aggressive adjustments to a setup without running enough practice laps before you make those adjustments. There's no reason at all to make an adjustment to any particular piece of a setup unless you've actually taken that car out on that track and ran enough laps to warm up the tires and get a feel of how the car is performing. Before you can make an adjustment to the setup, you need to know what is wrong about it so that you can make the correct adjustment to make that right. If you're just guessing and making adjustments that you think before you ever even make practice laps, you're not going to get anywhere with that. You're probably going to end up with a worse setup, because what you have to understand is temperatures play a huge role. You know, weather, wind, and temperatures play a huge role in how you need to set up that car. So making an adjustment without seeing how the car is reacting to the weather conditions and the track conditions is just dumb, and you just should not do that. So let the car get warmed up, get comfortable with the car, find out what you do not like about it, and then make adjustments to fix those problems. That's the order that needs to go in. The fourth big mistake I see is kind of similar to that, but it's not exactly the same, and that's just making adjustments to a baseline setup in general if you do not know what you are doing. So the baseline setups for the most part are pretty decent. You're not going to win a race, most sims, and it's the same across most sims. You're not going to win races with other people who have created really good setups and they have a lot of time invested in their setups, but the baseline setup will work for you to finish a race. But if you have no knowledge base of what making a particular change will do to a car, without a doubt, what's going to happen is you're going to make a bunch of changes and you're going to end up with a worse setup than the baseline setup. So before you go trying your hand at making setups, go do a little research. Find out what those things actually do to the car when you change them. Check out YouTube videos. I mean, there's loads of descriptive and very helpful videos and text documents and websites and stuff that will show you how to make a setup correctly. So go check those out before you make a baseline setup, because you're just going to make it worse for yourself. And I can get in lobbies and I clearly see when people do that, because their setups are just awful, and it just can't even possibly be as good as the baseline setup the way they're performing, and that's surely what has happened to them. So either go to a website where you can find setups already, which I made a couple videos ago where you can actually find that. That is easy for pretty much every sim. You can get some pretty good setups off of websites or databases, or learn yourself how to make a setup and then do it for yourself. So the fifth big mistake I see sim racers or new sim racers doing is over driving your car. It's not about how fast you can get around the track, it's how consistently you can get around the track. You have to remember that most sim races are going to be minimum of 10 or 15 minutes, some 20, some hours, and some even longer than that. And so it's about consistency. If you are pushing your car on the limit the entire time you are driving, eventually you will make a mistake, and that's going to cause you to off track or hit someone else, and this happens time and time again. So if you can just develop a pattern of consistency and run a consistently quick lap every time without endangering yourself of over driving, you're going to end up in the end in a much better situation than if you are just going as hard as you can the entire time. That's a huge mistake. I see new sim racers doing that a lot, and that's just a mindset thing. You need to get your setup right, and then just kind of take your time, relax, get into a groove, get into a rhythm, and just don't overdrive your car. The sixth big mistake, this is a biggie too. This is something that many people don't think about, but when you first get into sim racing, you are really excited, and you try to get as invested and as involved as you can, because that's what happens when things are new and exciting. But the number 6 mistake that I see is when people commit themselves to too many leagues or multiple different types of races at one time. Sim racing is a great hobby, but it's one that requires a lot of practice for each individual entity. If you like IndyCar, if you like GT cars, if you like dirt, if you like NASCAR, you have to put in a lot of practice and commitment to each one of those things individually to be successful in any of them. So when new sim racers hop in and they try their hand at dirt, and they try their hand at NASCAR, and they try their hand at GT, and then they go do IndyCar series, when you're doing so much, you don't have enough time to get good at any of them. You can get okay at all of them, but you won't ever be great at any of them, and I think that's a big problem. What you need to do is stop committing yourself to a whole lot of leagues or a whole lot of different types of races, and just pick one that you like the best and spend most of your time on that particular type of race. The 7th mistake that I see new sim racers making is using an H pattern shifter and a clutch as a beginner. Sim racing is hard. It's not easy. And I'll say this over and over again, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time to get good at it. So when you are new, what you want to be doing is learning your car. You want to be learning the tracks. You want to be learning the braking points. You want to get yourself in a mental state of understanding, like I said before, that you can't overdrive your car. There are a lot of things going on. You're now talking about learning pit strategies. There's so many things that you have to wrap your mind around if you want to be successful, that there's just no room to add that extra pedal in or that H pattern shifter. You just need to use the paddles, use the brake pedal and the gas pedal, and learn the rest of sim racing first. There's no reason to use that. Yeah, I understand that an H pattern shifter can be a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. But if you're trying to race competitively, just use the paddles, use the brake, use the gas. You don't need to use it right away. Once you get good and you're consistent and you're no longer a beginner, you're now an intermediate is what I would call it, then you can start introducing the H pattern shifter and the clutch, but not until that point, because it's just not a good idea. It will cause more problems. You're making your brain think about far too many things at one time, and that's just never a good idea. Number 8, using any other camera view other than the cockpit cam. You're sim racing now. It's supposed to be realistic. So running from the bonnet cam or the hood cam or the chase camera or any other camera other than the cockpit camera is wrong. If you're not used to running from the cockpit camera, it can seem a little bit difficult or different at first, but what you will find over time is that the cockpit camera is going to be much more natural and eventually will make you much more consistent than any other camera view that there is available on any sim. So remember, do not use the chase cam, the bonnet cam, or any of those. Use the correct camera, which is only the cockpit camera. Number 9 deals with a pretty similar situation, and that is sitting too far back in the car or using the incorrect field of view. So that's two things, but they're kind of in the same category. So when I say sitting too far back in the car, what I mean is most sims have a seat adjustment. What that does is it just moves the driver's line of sight forward, back, up, and down in the car. And what I find is that watching replays and seeing how other people perform and watching videos on YouTube of people who are just getting into sim racing, they have what I like to call the Forza Motorsports seat position, which is really far back in the car so you can see the dash and the radio and all the gauges and out all the windows, and that's all fine and dandy, except for when you can see so much in the car you can't see enough outside of the car. The other side of that is using the correct field of view. If you use an incorrect field of view, the objects outside of your vehicle are either smaller or bigger than what they really are, which throws your brain off, and it also makes you feel like you're moving faster or slower than you actually would move at the speed you're going. So that is a huge mistake. Huge mistake. I've even seen YouTube videos of so-called experienced sim racers giving people false information on that. Make sure you're using the correct field of view. It doesn't matter how much you see inside the car, you need to be seeing outside of the car, and all that stuff needs to be at the correct scale. And number 10 is a biggie, guys. This is really important, and I see this so much. It's no more important or less important than the other ones, but I see this more than any other thing on this list, and that's just driving carelessly and not respecting other drivers on the track. 90%, 95% of the people sim racing have got a lot of time invested in it. They've got a lot of money invested in it, and they take it very seriously. Sim racing is no longer a game in their minds. So when these new sim racers just hop out on the track and drive fearless and with no sense of direction and no worry about the annoyance and agony that they're causing other people by running into them, it's just not okay to do that, and it happens far too much. And not only does that affect the other people, it affects you too, especially when you're in a game like iRacing. You know, I mean, you have to be careful because your ratings, there's the deciding factor on whether or not you advance or not in your careers. So you have to be very careful with that, and it's just not okay to ruin someone else's race by being careless. That's just very disrespectful, and most people think of it as a very serious thing, and as a new sim racer, you need to realize that that's the way it is, and you need to take it seriously as well. And I actually came up with 11 things. I know this said this was 10 things that 10 mistakes that sim racers make, but I had an 11th that I had to add in. It's like a bonus, I guess you could say, because it's very important. I did not want to leave it out. And so the bonus number 11 is attempting to pass in non-passing zones. attempting to pass in non-passing zones. Just like in the real world, in real life, when you're out on the highway, there are places designed for you to pass, and there are places that are not designed and not safe for you to pass. It's the same thing in real racing. It is the same thing in simulation racing. There are places that are safe and places that are capable for you to make a pass without chancing ruining everyone's race, and there are other places that are not. A lot of corners are not good passing zones. A lot of very narrow sections on tracks are not good passing zones. There are places where you can use a draft to pass. You know, there are places that you learn work and places that do not. So do not attempt to pass in these non-passing zones, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to cause a wreck. And I see that happen a lot also. That is a huge mistake that I see the rookies making. So that is actually 11 big mistakes that I see new sim racers make. And those of you that do this stuff, if you can just work on not doing that, your own overall experience of sim racing will become much better, as well as not chancing making someone else's experience bad because of your decisions. So anyways, I hope that helped you out. If you're a new sim racer, maybe you'll take to some of these, or if you're an old sim racer and you want to add some other things down in the comments that you see that new non-seasoned sim racers make, you know, put them down below in the comments. That's cool too. And that's going to be the end of the video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, click that like button. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and click that bell to be notified when I create a new video. And as always, I really appreciate everybody watching the video. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.